In our San Francisco office, we have an RTSP camera that's pointed out the window, but I also have a Gigabit Ethernet camera that I just connected to the network here. There's a scan for cameras button in the bottom right here. When I click that, you'll see that this camera from Basler immediately pops up. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add Stream. And now you have an additional camera angle that you can see me from. I'm Shantanu, and I'm an enterprise engineer at Roboflow. And today we're going to talk about how to set up Gigabit Ethernet cameras for edge deployments. And typically in manufacturing environments or industrial environments where you don't have a reliable network connection to the cloud, you want to deploy hardware that has your compute very close to the cameras that are capturing the images that you're running your vision pipelines on. With Roboflow, we provide tools that make these deployments a lot easier to manage remotely. So this screenshot here is from Roboflow Deployment Manager and gives you an idea of the type of information that you can see anytime from any location to get some observability and some insight into what's happening on your edge device, whether that's an NVIDIA Jetson Orin or an NVIDIA Jetson Thor that's running compute and connecting to your cameras. We can get into that in a little bit more detail once I show you how that works. But when you're first starting out planning a vision application, the question that you often have is the camera that you're going to use to capture those images and provide input into your pipeline. Oftentimes, the place that our customers start with is an RTSP stream, and this is really useful for getting started quickly, but often introduces latency because of the encoding required to encode that stream and the decoding required when you're consuming that stream and running inference on that stream. USB cameras offer a much lower latency, much higher speed and resolution, but they also have a drawback, which a lot of your edge devices, whether that's an NVIDIA Jetson device or even an ordinary computer with a graphics card in it, has a limited amount of expansion for the number of USB devices you can plug in. There's also some limitations on how quickly you can swap those devices if you need to either replace them or you're adding additional devices, which we will do in just a moment. This is also the reason why a lot of our customers end up choosing a Gigabit Ethernet camera. You get that low latency. You don't have to encode and decode those individual frames, but you also are able to remotely configure these cameras and adjust settings like exposure and gain, or adjust even the network configuration of the camera so you can swap one camera in for another one. And because you can connect them to an external switch, you're not limited by the hardware interfaces that are available to you on the edge computer that you've purchased. So one of the challenges that comes up whenever you're connecting a Gigabit Ethernet camera is figuring out all of the low-level details, like which IP address it's connected to, or whether it's reachable from the device that you have connected to your network. And Roboflow makes a lot of this process much simpler by providing tools that let you automatically discover those cameras and also remotely configure them. So you can adjust these settings without having to physically connect a laptop or another computer you have with you to that camera right next to it. You can adjust these settings remotely and also gain some visibility into which cameras are available to your edge device to connect to. This is typically what you see when you log into a Roboflow workspace. And to access the deployment manager, you visit the deployments tab and click on the edge devices in the left-hand side of the screen. And you'll see that you have a few different devices available here. I've already got one that's set up running deployment manager on a server that's here in our San Francisco office. And in our San Francisco office, we have an RTSP camera that's pointed out the window. So this is pointed at Geary Street. That's just right outside here. And this RTSP camera does provide regular updates in frames. And we even have the option to visit a live stream that shows you exactly what's being consumed by the camera as well as the output of that pipeline. But I also have a Gigabit Ethernet camera that I just connected to the network here. And that Gigabit Ethernet camera provides higher resolution. It has a customized lens. It gives us the ability to adjust focus and aperture, and a lot more details about that image can provide us a little bit more crisp picture. You'll see that there's a scan for cameras button in the bottom right here. When I click that, the edge deployment that I have is going to scan for all the available cameras on the network, and you'll see that this camera from Basler immediately pops up. I get the model number and the serial number that I can use to check to make sure that it's the right camera. And if I hover over the IP address, I get some additional networking information that can help me confirm that I'm looking at the correct device. And this does look correct. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add Stream. And in this case, I've already got a Roboflow workflow set up that has that pipeline that you were seeing earlier that runs object detection. So I'm going to go ahead and add this stream and hit save. And in the meantime, while that stream is being added, I can show you a little bit more of the settings and options that are available to you in Deployment Manager that can help you manage your deployments and keep track of what's going on. So the first tab that's helpful is the resource monitor. And you'll see that you have charts here for CPU usage, memory usage, and GPU usage. And this device has only been online for a couple hours, so we have a couple hours of data here. And this allows me to keep track of what's happening remotely on this device. When I go to device alerts, I can configure an alert for any one of these streams. So the stream that I just set up there, I can select it and keep track of any drops or cutouts in the camera frames per second throughput or the inference frames per second throughput and receive an email if something goes wrong. Now, when I go back to the streams, you'll see that that camera has been connected and is now available for me to click into. And it takes a couple seconds for that image to show up. But once it does appear, you'll see that all it took was just a couple of clicks and we were able to configure this Gigabit Ethernet camera. And now you have an additional camera angle that you can see me from. And that HMI that we were looking at earlier, that dashboard, it now has an additional tab available to it that displays the output from this camera. The visualization you see here is also something that can help you focus your camera and calibrate it. And this is a block that you can add into any workflow while you're doing setup. So if you're trying to adjust focus or aperture on some of these Gigabit Ethernet cameras, you can get the metrics that'll help you do that immediately while you're doing your setup.